So, good morning, everyone. I'll be talking in English as we already agreed that. I'm sorry for my bad English, especially at this hour of the morning, but I'm happy that this year is the first year we have international guests, international friends. I say, so I'm happy to expose my presentation in English. This presentation is part of a larger research about the transmission of knowledge about warfare between 16th and 17th century. It is still a research in its early stages. Therefore, what I expose is just part of it. And especially, I'd like to expose the conceptual framework I'm going to use to conduct this study, and I will be happy to have some feedbacks. So, my research is from a cultural perspective and is about codified knowledge about war and the military in this period. I think it did exist, as also has been demonstrated by Professor Virgilio Ilari, and what would be more difficult to prove is the actual circulation of this knowledge and the actual practice of this culture of warfare. However, today we are going to discuss the exact problem of how the military of the early modern age regarded the element of chance and the unforeseen as a war problem, and eventually how they faced and managed it. Yeah, this problem is how my presentation will be divided. The problem of chance is important to say that is a very critical problem for warfare and is debated also a lot nowadays, obviously. For example, this is the last number of a French journal about civil-military relations, and this last journal has been dedicated to the problem of chance. So it's a very central subject to the debate. To explore this central aspect, I think it's important to start from the most important theorization of war developed in our culture, notably the work of Karl von Clausewitz, published for the first time and finished in 1832. In his work, especially in the first book, the one finished or more complete, we have different definitions of war, and in every definition, for example, the one I chose, we can see the central aspect is that war is thought as a clash of two living forces. So the central theme is interaction. And I quote, "Thus I'm not in control. The enemy dictates to me as much as I dictate to him," end quote. These essential dynamics are at the origin of war and reveal its chaotic nature. And also another quote from Clausewitz is that no other human activity is so continuously or universally bound up with chance, end quote. So Clausewitz in his work developed in many ways the concept of chance, for example, through the concept of friction, notably everything in war is simple, but the simplest thing is difficult, and many other concepts. The problem of chance has been already studied, obviously, in Clausewitz, as for example in an excellent chapter by Catherine Herbig in an important work of 1986, so it's very dated, but there are many others. The central thing is that Clausewitz thought war as an open system, and in this open system, chance is always central and present. So it is impossible to imagine war without it, and for this reason he introduced the concept of the element of genius and improvisation that will be always necessary in war, in his opinion. And the problem of chance evidently is also a problem in education and the education of military knowledge, because it can't be foreseen previously. So to face chance, Clausewitz also developed the concept of the coup d'oeil, that is the essential tool of Napoleon, and this particular aspect has been studied also by William Duggan, and here I expand my research because Duggan studying the coup d'oeil of Napoleon, so the coup d'oeil also being, and I quote, the concept merely refers to the quick recognition of a truth that the mind would originally miss or would perceive only after long study and reflection, end quote. So the coup d'oeil isn't something related to study, analysis, or just a quick impression. It relates to many things at the same time. Duggan, studying this element in Napoleon, then developed it for the USA Army. He so wrote a manual for he actually wrote a commentary of the field manual 5.0 of the Army Planning and Orders Productions, in which he criticized the approach of the USA Army because it tended too much to separate analysis from intuition. Instead, Duggan criticized the concept of the decision-making process of the army planning, sustaining that the coup d'oeil is a more fruitful tool, based on Napoleon and on Clausewitz, who theorized it. So, starting from this, I want to move on decision-making, indeed, because decision-making in military situations is the element of facing chaos for definition nowadays. It has been studied in the last decades a lot. For example, there is an excellent chapter in 1997, collective chapter. Then there is also a more specific article by Knighton in 2004 about reflecting on the risk factor within military decision-making. And also, decision-making is essentially in all the debates around game theory, evidently. In particularly, as emerged in a recent literature review of 2022, the debates inside game theory are more related to strategic problems, but decision-making and game theory are also related to operational and tactical situations. My hypothesis, I'm close, I want to bring inside this reflection a different element taken by the reflection of Jon Huizinga developed in Homo Ludens, because in this important work, Huizinga wrote a chapter titled Word and Game, chapter 5, in which he analyzed the ludic element inside war. However, Huizinga, when he wrote this book, it was 1930, so it was really inside a different context, and he studied just the archaic forms of war. He didn't consider modern warfare. And what I argue instead that we should take is definition of the ludic and agonistic element, instead to use it for a different scope. Indeed, what I would say using the ludic element of Huizinga is that in war, the moments of chance and uncertainty are moments in which the very nature of war is visible, as we saw from Clausewitz, and it is exactly in these moments that the ludic and creative elements of the soldier re-emerge. So, in war we can see the agonistic feeling at the base and the ludic interplay on how to face chaos. And the ludic elements, therefore, influence a lot the performance and the developments of the field. Indeed, if we took one of the definitions of Huizinga, he says that, and I quote, in the antithetical game of agonistic nature, this element of tension, of hazard, of uncertainty reaches its extreme limit. It is a matter of winning with such a passion as to threaten completely and annul the joyful lightness of play, end quote. Therefore, play is a very serious thing, and it tends to go over the playful aspect, and we can use, therefore, this element in analyzing war, this agonistic drive to surpass it. And from this point of view, I want to link to the exposition of Tiago of yesterday about emotion in battlefields. I think studying the element of adventure would be an interesting lens. Recently, it has been studied, for example, the element of fun, war and fun, in a recent issue of War and Society. Because studying this element doesn't imply a moral value of the element of adventure, fun, and play. We don't add this value, we just state that these elements are part of the war experience, and studying them can help us understanding the experience. Indeed, to see more closely this element, I want to focus a bit on contemporary warfare, because we have many sources, and as showed by Harari, doing a comparison can help us analyzing how in the early modern this element may have been developed. Particularly, and I will go quickly through this part, I chose two reflections emerged from the First World War. The first one by Adolf von Schell, who taught at the American Infantry School in 1930-31 and published later his lessons on battlefield psychology, in which he states that every man reacts differently at the shock of war, and every man reacts differently from peace situations. So we don't know previously how a man responds to warfare and to the element of chance. And this knowledge is gained, in his opinion, the commander gains this knowledge not through study, but through his senses and through the experience. So in his lessons, he wrote a lot about the element of chance and how to face it. Especially, he affirms that during operational situations, the tempo of the action tends to increase as there is an escalation of dangers. And in these moments, and I quote, "One of the most difficult things we have to do in war is to recognize the moment for making a decision." End quote. So the difficult thing in which it is necessary the coup d'oeil is not easy to understand, to state it previously than the situation unforeseen. And this process of choices in the right moments, I think, is the exact ludic element of war. Another example is by Rommel in his reflection on infantry attacks, and in which he recalls his experience during the First World War. And I won't stop on his work, but you can see in his narrative of his action how he constantly takes decisions and acts in different environments. And as he affirms after the first action of the First World War in Belgium, in his lesson of this action, he states that tactical initiative, so the consequential choices taken, is how the German infantry regain courage, I must say, as superiority over the counterparts after a situation of difficulty. So we can see how the ability of the command in this case helped gaining superiority over the enemy. And so to conclude this first part, it actually was very big, that the ludic answer isn't the only one. There are other kind of answers that Tiago yesterday explained that are more common, such despair, collapse, or failure. And from our point of view, we don't give a moral value to these answers, but I think that inserting the ludic element in the analysis of successful operations, it adds a new lens. So to go quickly with the last part, that is the less interesting for everyone because it's more specific. In the early modern warfare, in this culture I first introduced, we actually see the figure of Fortune, the goddess, archaic goddess, that arrived to the early modern through different stratifications, and is very present, obviously, for example, in Machiavelli, and it has been studied recently many occasions. For my research I chose in this to present just one case for today, that is the work of Imperiale Cinuzzi, who served under Alessandro Farnese in the Flanders, in France also, and later served in Hungary. So I think this work is significant because Cinuzzi is a very particular author, and it's very special. Indeed, we can see that we can say that other authors, other military authors of the time, we can consider their work like paintings of their descriptions of warfare. We can see the authors of the time writing about how the art of war, the transformations of the art of war developed, and how they imagined the art of war with very precise descriptions, realistic descriptions of the situation. On the other hand, Cinuzzi is special from this point of view because we might say he used an impressionist methodology, because he in his paragraphs he used the word leaving many spaces, leaving the subjects undefined, and this style, from a close reading, it leaves many space of interpretation, but from a wider perspective, it gives a more exact image of warfare of that time, because it doesn't foresee a reaction of war. He writes about the enemy as a thinking entity who answer and who always try to block our actions. So he starts with the strategic considerations on how wars are started, but it's more difficult to finish them because everything we plan on the paper is not what we will face on the action of warfare. He debates logistic, underlying how the enemy will always do everything to act against us. And then he goes on with also operational considerations, actually adding that most of the difficulties will be faced in this realm. And for example, spends many pages describing the problem of intelligence, of gaining information about the enemy, about the fact that many information will be false, and the commander needs to value with attention the true and the false informations. And from a strategic point of view, the solution he imagines for the commander is not to constrain the general too much. Indeed, he affirms that when planning a war, it should be always prescribed and allowed to the general then to act and adapt to the situation, almost describing a process of contournement described recently by Olivier Schmidt. So going quickly to the last part, from the operational point of view, instead another part he adds is to value always the art of prevention, and prevention must be strengthened by the mental laboratory that is developed through 3 items. One is the study of history, of the military history. The second is the study of recent campaigns conducted by other generals. And lastly, there is the personal experience of the commander. These 3 elements all corroborate the image of war and the ability to take decisions. Going quickly to last, for example, to develop this mental laboratory, one important aspect is the practice of hunting is an essential element to develop the coup d'oeil we previously described. And yes, so he developed some actions to not to foresee the unexpected, but to develop the ability to deal with it, and hunting, for example, one of these situations. Going quickly to conclude and not steal more time, Another important element is the consideration of irrational aspects. We will just mention this. And yes, these things, I think, this hypothesis I'm trying to develop, it could help adding a new lens to the cultural history of this period, adding, for the study of the experience of war and not only, eventually. Further research is needed in more comparison with different authors and also in the actual practice of war. There is a more difficult element to deal with. And what I wanted to do today, however, is actually attempting to sketch a partial genealogy of this problem that is not something that is present in today's warfare only, as we often see in some debates around war studies. Chances are problems nowadays faced because of the more technological environment, etc. But it's something that was always present, and therefore studying how the men of different periods dealt with it can add further elements to have a more sophisticated interpretation of this problem. Thank you for your attention.